Hey guys, I'm Dimension Jumper, and today I'll be talking about how some of Zelda's well-known enemies could be brought into Breath of the Wild 2 and how they might be used against Link combat-wise. And this video is kind of inspired by Triforce Trends' video on how Link could be used within Breath of the Wild 2, and I thought why not talk about some of the enemies that have been used in older Zelda games and how they could be used within Breath of the Wild 2. So, I'm going to be talking about 3 different enemies, and they all have been played against or beaten against in various other Zelda games. And that's going to be Ganondorf, Dark Link, and the Dark Nuts. Now, I think that these are 3 enemies in the Zelda series that have, some well-known recognition. With Ganondorf, he's like the main bad guy of the series. With Dark Link, he's basically Shadow Link or Dark Link, depending on who you ask with fans. And then you've got the Dark Nuts, who are basically these giant behemoths of enemies who are basically clad in armor, and they can basically just hit you like a truck and basically take away a lot of your hearts. And I thought, why not see how these characters could be used within Breath of the Wild 2. So to start off with, I'm going to talk about Ganondorf, then move on to Dark Link, and then move on to the Dark Nuts. So with Ganondorf, I think with what the game is going with, in terms of Breath of the Wild 2, this is going to be like a sort of more darker version of Ganondorf in terms of how evil he's going to be in the game. So I think for his combat-wise, he's probably either going to start off with swords or magic. Now, Ganondorf is known to use magic and swords depending on which game you play. And I think when you face him, probably at the end of the game of Breath of the Wild 2, he's probably going to start off using his swords and probably doing a bit of Ganondorf tennis. And then I think he's also going to do some kind of fighting style that's basically a combination of all his previous fighting styles that we've seen in previous Zelda games like Twilight Princess, The Wind Waker, Ocarina of Time, and I think he's gonna do some some of those combos that we get to see him do, and probably add some new sort of fighting styles to his fighting boss battle thing, and I think it's gonna be probably a really cool and sort of intimidating version of Ganondorf, because I think even though the previous Ganondorfs that we've seen in previous Zelda games were cool in their own games, I think that Breath of the Wild 2 version of Ganondorf is going to be the strongest that we've seen him, because we don't really know how long he's been frozen, trapped, question mark, in the Breath of the Wild 2 teaser trailer. So I think when Ganondorf is released and he starts to begin regenerating himself, I feel like when we finally do get to battle him, I feel like this is going to be the strongest version of Ganondorf that we have seen so far within the Zelda series. And then I would like to see him for his second phase, turn into his beast form. Now, I would really like him to turn into something similar like in Ocarina of Time, because that was a towering beast of Ganon. I don't really want him to turn into his form in Breath of the Wild, because that boss fight with Clanty Ganon and Dark Beast Ganon was not the best. It was kind of slow in its attacks, and when it was its laser beam, they rarely hit me at all. So I would have really liked him to see him taking the form of his Ganon beast form in Ocarina of Time, and I would like to see him use his swords as well, and he can possibly change from either his blades to his spear, because we have seen Ganon use a spear in various Zelda games, and he has been shown to use 2 giant swords as well, that being in Ocarina of Time. And I would like to see him probably switch around these weapons. So probably for the first part he could use his swords, for the second part he could use his spear, but then for the final part Ganon could use a combination of both swords and spears, and that could be somewhat really cool. And again, like with the Ganondorf fight, this could be an intimidating version of Ganon, and this could be a really difficult boss to fight, and I think that would be somewhat really cool. And for the final part, like if it's like going to be like a sort of like finale for Ganondorf, I would like to see Link thrusting the Master Sword into like where the hand was. You know, that kind of looks like an obvious sort of weak spot, and then Zelda sort of using her sealing magic to basically stop Ganondorf once and further sealing him away. And I think that'll be a cool sort of send off to Ganondorf, because I would really like to see a new kind of bad guy take up the reins of Ganondorf or something like that in a future Zelda game, and we can get to see a new sort of Demon King or something. And now I'm going to be moving on to Dark Link. So with Dark Link, we have seen various versions of him. He first appeared in The Adventure of Link, and then the last appearance that he's kind of made was in Spirit Tracks. Now in The Adventure of Link, he was the final test for Link by the King of Hyrule at the time, so to see if Link was worthy enough to get the Trophies of Courage. And then he appeared again in Ocarina of Time, as a mini-boss in the Water Temple, and then became the sort of like final mini-boss opponent person in the boss room rush thing in Hyrule Castle. But for Dark Link, I would love to have him fight him as a boss, kind of like how he was a boss in The Adventure of Link. And for this, for this version of Dark Link, I would like to have him use some of the abilities that Link could use in Breath of the Wild. So he could have the champion's abilities, some rune attacks, so like, you know, Stasis, Magnesis, Cryonis, and the other one, I forgot what that one was. And it could also possibly use the champion abilities as well. So probably for the first phase, I would like to see him. I would like to see Dark Link like using some of the champion abilities, some of the rune attacks. But then once you get to the second phase of the fight, Dark Link like does this sort of it's going to be like similar to, like, you know, Link's laser beam attack, but instead of being hit, but instead of being this sort of like laser beam attack, it's going to be this like surge of evil magic energy which will hit Link, and then that will disable his abilities, and it works the same as well for Dark Link. So for the second half of the fight, I would like to see both Dark Link and Link going at it with just their swords and nothing but their swords. Like, this will be a very cool way of seeing who's the better swordsman, either Link or a Shadow. And I think this will be the coolest version of Dark Link that we'll probably get to see, because the Dark Link, I think he's a cool and interesting enemy and sort of like opposite of Link, because with Link, he's basically the light. He's basically there to save Hyrule from Ganondorf or whoever is trying to take over the kingdom. But with Dark Link, he's basically the opposite. He's what Link doesn't represent. Because with Dark Link, he represents the darkness within Link and everything that Link opposes. And I think this will be the greatest clash against Link and a Shadow in all the games that Shadow Link has appeared in. And with the second fight, it will be quite cool because we don't get to see any of these two characters using their abilities. So they won't be using any champion abilities, none of the rune attacks, just two swordsmen fighting each other. And then when it comes to the final blow, I would like to have them sort of like clash swords, kind of like how Link and Ganondorf did in Twilight Princess, where they both had to struggle to see who would come out on top. And then with Link, he'll just like do a sort of one of those kick things to Dark Link, and then he could just stab Dark Link with the Master Sword, and then Dark Link could possibly explode in like a dark pool of light or something, and then that'll be the end for Dark Link, and that'll be really interesting, cool and battle to see happen. And yeah, I think that'll be some sort of I would like to see their boss fight so much. And now I'm going to be moving on to the Dark Nuts. Now, the Dark Nuts it's probably supposed to be the main reason why I wanted to make this video, because I have two ideas of how the Dark Nuts could be brought into Breath of the Wild 2 and how their combat might be used. So, one of the ways that they could be brought into Breath of the Wild 2 is that when Ganondorf is trying to regenerate himself, he could use some of his magic to basically resurrect some like old Hylian knights, but instead of like, you know, trying to help Link, Ganondorf uses the resurrected knights to basically do his beck and call, and he can turn them into Dark Nuts, and there could be these giant skeletal beings that are clad in armor, and it could be like it could kind of be like Twilight Princess, in which you've got the main armor, then you've got the secondary armor. So it could be like, you know, you hack away the armor, and then when you see the secondary armor, it could be like some parts of the Dark Knight's armor could be on. So like you could see some, like, you know, bit of an arm, bit of a leg, bit of a head, that sort of thing. And then you could see some other parts, like having their skeleton parts just shown. Like you could see a bit of arm, bit of leg, bit of head, bit of whatever. Or Ganondorf could give some armors or Dark Knight armors to the Yiga clan, because the Yiga clan are known to worship Ganondorf and want to resurrect him. So the Yiga Blade Masters could take on this armor, and then they themselves become the Dark Knights. And that one of those two things would be cool and interesting to see how the Dark Knights could possibly be brought into the game. Now, for their sort of combat, I would like to see them have some sort of like combination of some of the moves that we've seen within previous Zelda games. So let's say they could have like some of their combat skills from with the Wind Waker and Twilight Princess. So let's say the weapons they use are like these big claymore swords that they can only use with one hand, kind of like how the king does it with an Age of Calamity. And then when it comes to the armor being hacked off, they use the weapons that they have, you know, with underneath that armor. Now, for the Dark Knights, I would like to see them like use a variety of a variety of weapons. Those being royal claymores, ancient royal claymores, broadswords, and it'll kind of be like how. And also, I like to see them around of Hyrule, kind of like how you could see some guardians scattered around Hyrule, and there'll be more as the further you get closer to Hyrule Castle. But they could either have, like, you know, some, you know, some weapons that we've seen within Breath of the Wild, or they could have their own weapons, and it could go the similar way in how in the Wind Waker, where you could pick up some weapons like a stick, some Dark Knight swords, and then you could like just chuck it at them or just use them to your own ways. But these are weapons are only used when you're fighting the Dark Knights, and they disappear along with the Dark Knights. But one of the main prizes that you could collect from the Dark Knights themselves is their secondary weapon. Now, with the secondary weapon, I'd like to see them probably using, like, you know, their own sort of single-handed melee swords, and this could be, like, you know, similar to how the Lynels were used, in which you could take their weapons once you defeated one, and it could be like, you know, with the Lynels, they either used a spear, a sword, or the giant crusher thing. I forgot what it was called. It's like that giant hammer thing that had this sort of spiky bits on the end. It could go similar with the Dark Knights, in which instead of having a sword or something, they could have like a malice, like one of those malice things, and possibly a spear as well. But I'm not. That could be a possibility, and Yeah, and then and also similar to how in Twilight Princess, when you've hacked off the armor completely, the Dark Knights then start to go faster. Their attacks are more, I don't know, are more aggressive, and because and if they because like, you know, with the Dark Knights they can like go super fast and stuff like that. And also if they've all their armor's off and they have, you know, the normal blades, and if they hit Link, Link takes more damage. That'd be something quite cool to see with the Dark Knights. So yeah, that's sort of been my video in which I talk about 3 enemies, that being Gandalf, Dark Link, and the Dark Knights, and talking about how each one of them can be used combat-wise and how they can be brought into the game, sort of. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.